Hello everyone, it's Bound here. Welcome back to another video. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Koraidon. So, Koraidon, as you may know, has been causing a lot of disruption in the Pokemon Battle Stadium singles metagame, especially in the past few seasons, with Season 31 having a Koraidon team taking first place, and so it kind of influenced a lot of players to use Koraidon, and Koraidon became pretty much the meta Pokemon for the season after that, becoming the #1 used Pokemon in the metagame, as well as, it continuing to see top level usage throughout the seasons as well. Even this season, it is #3 in usage, and so I'm gonna be breaking down some ways you can do, some things you can do to counter this Pokemon, because it is a very hard Pokemon to deal with, and it has a lot of options they can use, and even defensive play is not necessarily a straightforward option in dealing with it, just because of the tools it has. So I'm just gonna be breaking it down in this video. So on screen, you can see Koraidon's base stats. Starting off with 100 HP, which meaning Koraidon has a lot of HP to work with. 135 base attack, which is further boosted by Koraidon's ability, which is called Aura Chalk Pulse, which basically puts up the sun and boosts not only its fire moves, but its overall attack power by 1.3 times. So it becomes a very strong threat, not just 135 base attack, it has boosts on top of that. And then defense is 115, special defense 100. So it has a very bulky stat profile, so even though it's a dragon and fighting type, fairy type moves are pretty much the only way you can win it, KO it, because 4 times effective moves is pretty much the only way you're going to be able to get through those bulky stats. And it's just natural legendary bulk, so not really too surprising there. So, and also with terrestrialization on the table, even those fairy types can be, resisted by a fire Terra or a steel Terra. So you have to be very careful in what your strategy is to defeat this Pokemon. So Flutter Mane has been previously used as a counterplay, a countermeasure to Koraidon. However, with terrestrialization and Scarf Koraidon being very prevalent, it makes Flutter Mane very hard to use to counter this thing. So yeah, fairy types are they're not too straightforward in terms of countering it. Now, if terrestrialization is off the table, that makes Koraidon much easier to deal with a fairy type like Flutterbane, Mimikyu, and Primarina, and things like that. So while I do think fairy types are a good way to deal with Koraidon, I also think you need to consider the fact that Koraidon can terrestrialize, and you could find a way to maybe make the Pokemon outside of Koraidon terrestrialize, which is kind of hard to do. But in general, I would like to have a backup plan in just in case having a fairy type isn't effective. So one thing that I really like about dealing with Koraidon is that a fairy type forces it to terrestrial, usually in a fire, steel, or electric. So maybe if you force it to terrestrialize with the fairy type, you can have a ground type with earthquake in the back that can threaten Koraidon for terrestrializing. So that's just one example of compatibility with Terra, but in general, that's how I really like to think about countering certain Pokemon, just having that type synergy with terrestrialization. And last but not least, the speed stat, 135 base speed. So that pretty much puts it at the same speed bar as Miraidon, Fluttermane, and Qianpao, so it has a lot of competition for who's going to be faster, and each 4 of these Pokemon are top 10 in the usage stats in the metagame, so there's a lot of competition with speed. And that's why a lot of the Koraidons runs Choice Scarf. So now I'm going to get into the item usage for Koraidon. So getting into the item usage, as I said before, the Choice Scarf item is the #1 used item on Koraidon, just because it allows Koraidon to outspeed most Pokemon in the game, including the Pokemon that it's competing with the same speed. And this works really well with U-turn. So Koraidon has a U-turn move that allows it to pivot around, and this is what makes it really difficult to deal with. So this is why I don't really consider walls like Dondozo a guaranteed counter to Koraidon, just because it can pivot around, and then you lost your momentum off of a U-turn. So yeah, U-turn kind of makes it so that you need to have a more defined game plan than just using walls. So while Dondozo can tank Koraidon's general attacks like Flare Blitz, Close Combat, even Bandit Outrage, you can take 2 of those. I mean, it depends on it. With leftovers, it cannot do that, but if it has like a Citrus Berry, it can do that. But Dondozo in general has to watch out for bandit attacks, but it can take anything other than that bandit, so that's really good. But yeah, you still have to watch out for U-turn, and this is why speed is so important, and also Trick Room, because Trick Room does not care about what Koraidon is running in terms of the item. And also just having like a Scarf Calyrex Shadow or some really fast option just does not care about what Koraidon is doing. So those are definitely good options if you really don't want to worry about it. And also, like I said, Mimikyu is a very good option just because it has, you know, a turn to do whatever it wants. Even though Koraidon can obviously terastallize from preventing itself from being weak to Fairy, it can still, you know, Mimikyu can still threaten it with Curse, Destiny Bond, you know, and even past priority moves to pick it down for damage, right? Another good way to deal with it is using Chien-Pao. So Chien-Pao, obviously, you know, has to deal with Fire Terra and other Terras, but Ice Crash pretty much forces it to Terra and can flinch Koraidon out of a Terra if you're running a faster Chien-Pao. And so it has that scare factor. And Focus Sash Chien-Pao is really good. Unless you're facing a Scale Shot Koraidon with loaded dice, in that case, normal Sash Chien-Pao will die to 4 hits of Scale Shot. So that's why some Chien-Paos are investing into some bulk to live that. But yeah, Koraidon has ways to get around that. So it just comes down to having a versatile game plan. Next up is the Assault Vest item. So Assault Vest, yeah, is run with like Drain Punch and U-Turn. So usually you'll see like Fire Terra or Electric Terra on the Assault Vest sets. Electric Terra is actually an interesting one, because you do lose power against like Landorus, Therian, and other ground types, but however, you do get that advantage against water types and flying types and things like that. So Electric Terra is something that has to be respected. Fire Terra, obviously, you know, is a standard Terra on Koraidon, and we'll get that into Terra types in a second, but you know, Assault Vest with Fire Terra is very common as well. It actually won a season in Regulation G with the single legendary format, so it was really it proves to be a good set as well. So now in terms of taking its attacks, like, well, defensive from the defensive end, in the single legendary formats, there was some use of utility umbrella, the utility umbrella item, which, you know, doesn't allow the damage multiplier increase from weather to take into account the damage. So that is a really niche item that can be used to, you know, deal with Koraidon's moves better. But with the dual legendary format, a lot of players are emphasizing versatility and just generally good items all across the board, like Focus Sash, Booster Energies, Assault Vest, Citrus Berries, just, you know, stable items. And so utility umbrella is seeing less use in general. So that's something I want to bring up because there's just a lot of, you know, Koraidon's emphasizing power. So like I said, the Choice Band sets, but also the Life Orb sets, because Life Orb has actually been popping up a lot more just because it has the freedom to switch up its attacks while just throwing out massive amounts of damage. So this has to be respected, because if you're using things like Dondozo or other walls to deal with it, you can't really take advantage of its... because usually those teams take advantage of it being locked in, but if it has a Life Orb, it can just poke holes in the teams with the walls. So that's why Life Orb has been increasing, especially with Electric Terra. So that's what I've been seeing a lot, Life Orb with Electric Terra. So it's definitely a huge threat that, yeah, like I said, has to be respected. Next up is Citrus Berry. So Citrus Berry, you'll see it with like Bulk Up or Swords Dance sets. Usually Bulk Up just because it has that extra cushion room. Bulk Up, you'll usually see like Drain Punch, Taunt, Flame Charge, or even Flare Blitz just for massive damage. But usually the Bulk Up sets will be run with Grimmsnarl or any other screen setters. So that's something you have to keep in mind. And yeah, a lot of Bulk Up Koraidons do run Taunt to stop defensive, you know, countermeasures, such as Yawn, you know, and other things like that. And so this, yeah, if you see a Grimmsnarl with Koraidon, there's a good chance that it might have a Bulk Up set or a Swords Dance set. So that's something I would keep in mind. And also, yeah, it could have Citrus Berry or Leftovers, most likely. Lumberry does come up from time to time, but that's kind of... I mean, you won't really need a Lumberry if you're running Taunt with Bulk Up. So Lumberry usually will be like with Bulk Up 3 attacks or SD 3 attacks or something. So definitely a respectable option. It can definitely turn the tides of a match really quickly. And then Focus Sash and Mental Herb aren't really, like... You know, they're not really... I haven't really seen... Personally, I haven't really fought against them, so I can't really say too much about them, but they are, you know, items that have been used on Koraidon. So, with the items out of the way, I'm going to talk about the Terra types that are used on Koraidon. So by looking at the Terra types that are used on Koraidon, we can see that Fire Terra is obviously, you know, the most used Terra by a long shot. 75% of Koraidon's running Fire Terra. Now granted, this is cumulative data over the season, so it's not a, you know, a direct indicator of what the Koraidons today are running. If you're trying to inspect what Koraidons are out there, I think this is a great tool to use regardless of it being a cumulative data. And also, it's only been half a month, so you're not going to really get too much deviation from this at the moment. So yeah, as I said before, Fire is the most common Terra, 75%, Electric and Steel coming behind around 8%, Fairy 5%. So those are the 4 Terras that are really used mainly on Koraidon right now. So Fire Terra is obviously really good because it boosts the power of Flare Blitz and Flame Charge and just, you know, gets rid of those weaknesses to Ice and Fairy. So a very good Terra type overall, and it has very few flaws. Because also as I said, you're getting you have the sun on your side, right? So it reduces the power of opponents' water type moves, and this is why you see a lot of Koraidon teams having like a lot of water weak Pokemon, because if Koraidon is a main, you know, component of the team, you can kind of get away with, you know, using things like Chien-Pao and Garganacl or Ting-Lu a lot better, just because the water types are weakened power offensively, so it just makes it really easy to team build in that sense. It gives you a lot more freedom. So, and then Electric is really used as an offensive Terra type option. It does have some defensive benefits, like getting, you know, being immune to Thunder Wave, which is a very common option on things like Flutter Mane. But yeah, you're mainly going to be, a lot of players use Electric Terra for, you know, doing high damage to Dondozo, Ho-Oh, and other defensive Pokemon. So that's a really good, you know, option for it. However, it does have to watch out for things like Landorus Therian, because its main, you know, gimmick will be immune, and it still has to worry about opposing Earthquakes, and it won't have the raw power from Flare Blitz to usually push through it. And that's why Fire Terra is really the most common Terra on Koraidon, just because the Flare Blitz from Fire Terra just allows it to push through more Pokemon, and just, you know, if it has a Choice Scarf, it can just clean up a match very easily. And so it's just the most versatile Terra out there. And so when building a team, I would mainly just worry about Fire Terra first, and then if other Terras are causing you problems, then I would consider maybe changing a few things up to have an option to deal with them. And so now I'm going to be talking about Koraidon's general move usage and what to watch out for. So the most used move on Koraidon is Flare Blitz. So Flare Blitz is a very strong move. Like I said, it is powered up by the very common Fire Terra that Koraidon usually runs. And this just allows Koraidon to push through multiple Pokemon, or just push through a Pokemon on one hit. It gives Koraidon recoil damage though. So that's the downside of Flare Blitz. So by combining this recoil aspect with the Rocky Helmet from the defensive side, it really punishes Koraidon for using Flare Blitz. So that's something I would recommend, using some sort of Rocky Helmet if you want a cushion to deal with Koraidon. So let's say you're using a choice locked Pokemon, and Koraidon comes in and you're not confident in the matchup, you can have a cushion, you know, with the Rocky Helmet, like a defensive Pokemon with the Rocky Helmet, that really punishes it for using Flare Blitz. And then now the Koraidon is in range of another offensive, you know, option from a faster Pokemon. So that's a really good option that I would consider using, because it works with a lot of game plans and is very flexible. And also Koraidon, like I said, runs U-Turn. Usually you'll see U-Turn on either Choice Band, Choice Scarf, or Assault Vest Koraidon sets. So when you see that move, think about one of those 3 items. Obviously you can use damage calculations to see like what the item Koraidon is running, like a Choice Band. You can tell very easily, and then that rules out one out of 3 options. So, but yeah, U-Turn is a really good option, and that's why I said using walls is not the most safe answer to Koraidon. And I'll get into some other reasons why in a second. Outrage is obviously a very strong move that choice locked Koraidons like to use. Close combat, same kind of thing, usually on the choice sets. Scale Shot is a very common item for the loaded dice Koraidon set. You know, loaded dice allowing Koraidon to hit at least 4 Scale Shots, so 100 base power move. Only problem is that Scale Shot can miss, so using this as a main core game plan for a team is risky just because of that miss chance. 90% is kind of pushing it. I mean, 95% is still pushing it just because you want to be as consistent as possible, but Scale Shot, if you're running Scale Shot, you do run the risk of missing right there and potentially losing a match if you miss, because in Regulation I, you don't have much room for error. So that's why it's really important to have as much accuracy as possible when building teams. Flame Charge is a move that's used mainly for speed boosting, so maybe on Swords Dance, but it can be used on any set. Like, I've seen it on every type of set. Loaded Dice, even Choice Band Flame Charge for whatever reason, just sweeping through a team. Even the Assault Vest sets, just to get that speed boost. So Flame Charge is a very versatile move. Also, obviously, it becomes very strong when combined with the Fire Terra. So it's a very good move that gives a lot of value. And Collision Course is a very strong move as well. Obviously, the thing that can differentiate Collision Course from Close Combat is the fact that Collision Course gains a 33% power boost if it is a super effective attack. So, against like for example, a banded Close Combat a Ting-Lu can survive a banded Close Combat, but a Ting-Lu cannot survive a banded Collision Course. So that's one example right there of the application of Collision Course. However, usually Collision Course is not really run on Choice Band sets. However, I have seen it. It's usually run on the Loaded Dice set just because it works well with the type synergy of, Scale Shot, Iron Head, and whatever moves. Just because if you're using Scale Shot and Iron Head and then a Steel type comes out, you can just use Collision Course and threaten a lot of damage on it. And also with Flare Blitz, but Collision Course doesn't give the recoil, so that's why it's, Flare Blitz is a good move, but you also have to consider the risk, and Collision Course really has no risk. So that's the really good thing about it. Swords Dance, it's used as a breaking option, usually very common on Loaded Dice sets. I mean, you might see the occasional bulk up Loaded Dice Scale Shot set, but usually it's Swords Dance. So that's something you want to watch out for right there. And Drain Punch is usually seen on the Assault Vest sets, and Iron Head usually seen on Scale Shot sets that goes Terra Steel. So that's something you have to watch out for right there. So two moves that I also want to consider is Substitute and Taunt, right? So this kind of falls back into what I was talking about with using walls to counter Koraidon. Dondozo can very easily get messed up by a Substitute from Koraidon. So a lot of Dondozos run Yawn and Fissure, so Substitute kind of makes both of those options very inconsistent. The combination of Sub and Skill Shot can very much threaten Dondozo very easily, and if Dondozo chooses to go Fairy, then Ironhead can come out. So that's pretty much the use of Ironhead right there, just to prevent, just kind of to punish those Fairy Terras from coming out and meeting the Skill Shot. And then Taunt is another option to, mess up walls. So Taunt is usually seen with Bulk Up, when on a Screens team, or Taunt. I've even seen Substitute plus Taunt and Skill Shot Koraidon. So it's really good at just messing up that recover, or messing up that Yawn or whatever. So it's just a really strong option that can mess up a lot of builds, because a lot of builds in this regulation right now are relying on walls, because with all the Scarf Koraidons out there, it's hard to outspeed that Pokemon. So that from that sense, walls can be good, but when you're considering all the Koraidons out there, it's it can lose you the match immediately if you guess wrong. So that's something you would have to consider right there. So that's pretty much my rundown on Koraidon and potential countermeasures you can make. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I plan to do this video for more legendaries in the future, especially for Regulation J with mythicals, and maybe some of those mythicals will be really, really strong, and I know some of them will be. So please look forward to more videos on the How to Counter series, and I'll see you all in the next one.